is this training about? This training I have divided into, and this session is also recorded. So everything is recorded. So when you want to see the recordings, you can always send a mail at questpond@questpond.com. So this training is all about microservices using Docker, Kubernetes, and only on Windows. You must have seen a lot of those trainings of Docker, which happens only on Linux, but I have taken that bold step of saying that I'm going to go and stick to only to Microsoft to Windows, right? Right. So, and after that, you know, also I'm going to go and talk about something called as UX, which is more of Azure-oriented hosting Docker and Kubernetes on Azure, how to run managed services of Docker and Kubernetes on Azure, right? And this training I've divided for now into 1 hours daily. So day 1, day 2, day 3. But I think that, you know, the topics are so heavy, must be I will need 2 or 3 days more as well, right? So so the goal is the following. Let me just go to my whiteboard out here, and the goal is the following today. Today's 1 hour. So the first thing is, yes, the whole training. We are going to go ahead and talk about Docker. That's the first thing what we will talk about. Then after we do Docker, we will talk about Kubernetes. And then we will talk about how to use both of these services on Azure, right? Now, the first thing is all of these 3 things, you know, have come into picture, you know, because of one term called as microservices. So let's first understand this terminology. What exactly is microservices, right? Now, if you see developers, you know, developers, when they develop applications, they develop using the monolith architecture. In other words, for example, let us say that you have an application which has, let us say, accounting, right? Let us say it has inventory, right? And let us say it has payroll. So what you do is, as a developer, you just create one solution. Yes, you do create different class files. You do have your different chproj files, different project files. You do modules, right? But at the end of the day, all of these three things are one big monolith application. So if you see at this moment, the way developers do development, they do by using the monolith architecture, right? Which is fine, you know. And definitely, you know, all of when developers develop using monolith architecture, they just create one database. And when they go live, they just go live with this whole system in production, right? Now, there are certain challenges here. And let me point out one of the specific challenges is working parallelly. If you working parallelly and also working cross system, right? Working parallelly means what? For example, now think about there is a developer who is actually coding on inventory application. So he makes some changes to the inventory application, and he goes and also does changes to the inventory tables. But at the end of the day, for some reason, it is possible that even the accounting tables will get affected. Even the payroll tables will get affected, right? So what happens is, you know, the developer who is coding on accounting, he also gets affected. I'm sure that whenever you are merging your solutions, you will find that suddenly somewhere who is far, far away, right, creating a simple utility also affects you while you do the merging, right? So one of the big problems with this monolith architecture is not in terms of deployment, but in terms of development, is that I really cannot work parallelly. So I want to say that 2 developers, you work on payroll, we do any changes on accounting, you don't have to worry about it. It is not going to affect you, right? So if you want to do parallel development, parallel deployment, parallel testing, right? That's where, you know, microservices come into picture. So in microservices architecture, what people do is they create separate, isolated projects, separate, isolated applications. That's the right word to use, applications, right? So basically, you can have your accounting application, right, which is having all its code files. It has its own what do you call its own check-in storage, right? It has its own tables, it has its own database, right? And the developers can just work parallelly. And then you have inventory, you know, wherein it has its own database, right? If they want to make a call to each other, must be they can use something like Web API or must be WCF to communicate to each other, right? And when these things get hosted into a server, then they get hosted into separate installations. So basically, probably let's say that both of them get hosted into IIS, assume, right? So in this, you know, we will have a separate IIS application directory only for this, and a separate SQL Server table only for accounting. And this application also gets hosted separately on some IaaS, must be on Apache or wherever, right? But it's a separate unit, right? So when they go live, they go live as separate different entities. So one entity, when it comes down, it does not affect the other entity. When you deploy this entity, the other entity does not get affected until there is some integration, right? So this is termed as microservices architecture, right? In microservices architecture, you have separate installations, separate deployment. Okay. Now, but there are some issues, there are some challenges in terms of not coding, I will say, but in terms of deployment, the challenges of deployment, right? So think about it. Let's talk about the deployment architecture, how you will go about it. So you create an accounting application, separate accounting database. You create an inventory application, separate inventory database. Very good. Now you want to go live, right? So when you want to go live, must be you will have only one, you would like to have only one Windows server. Now it is not feasible. It is not feasible to have two hardwares. You don't want to have one box, right, where accounting gets installed and then another box, where inventory gets installed. This will definitely increase your cost. So you don't want to do that, right? So you probably would like to say, okay, how about going and creating everything into one physical hardware? Now, when you say you want to go and deploy both of them into one physical hardware, still there are challenges, right? So you take this accounting application, you deploy it, you take this inventory application, you deploy it, right? And let's say at this moment, they are deployed separately, but they are deployed probably on the same IaaS server, on the same SQL Server instance, right? And let us go one step ahead. Let's say that this accounting application is developed in Java. Assume. Let me make it complicated. So it will probably get hosted on Apache. Let's say that this application is developed in .NET, so it will get hosted on IaaS. Now you are into more problems. So in this server now, you will install IaaS, you will install Apache, you will probably have Oracle, you will probably have SQL Server. So now the deployment is becoming more complex and complex, right? So the other way, what probably you can think about is, you will say that, okay, how about creating different virtual machines? So one of the things, what developers think about deployment in microservices, and I've seen that in 90s and 2000, people used to do that. So what they used to do is they used to create VMs, so virtual machine, which is having Linux, and then you have Windows, which is having Windows virtual machine, right? So you host your application in this, and then you host your application in this. But then again, this is a problem. Think about that, how heavy this will be. If you have 4 microservices, then we are talking about 4 virtual machines which needs to run, right? And it still does not make sense. And second, when you create a virtual machine, you actually create the whole copy of the operating system. So for example, when I create so here is the OS. This is my host OS. Assume my host OS is Windows, right? Now on this, I create a Linux OS, a complete different copy. And then again, I duplicate here and I create again a Windows OS, VM, different copy. This is not only heavy, but also it is not scalable, right? That's where, when people talk about microservices, they talk about something called as containers. So rather than creating virtual machines, when you talk about microservices architecture deployment, you have one OS, one host OS, which can be Windows or which can be Linux. So this is your host OS, right? But you create different containers. So you have a Linux container, must be. A container you can think about, it's like an isolated unit wherein only the necessary Linux bin files are present. Only the necessary Linux bin files, which are necessary to run that operating system. And then in this, you can go and you can install Apache, you can go and probably install something else, must be Oracle. So here, we don't create a copy of Windows OS again, right? In the same way, I can go and I can create a Windows container, which only has the Windows necessary binary files which can run Windows, right? So rather than going and creating virtual machines, how about going and creating containers, right? So whenever we talk about microservices, this word containers always comes into picture, isolated unit, right? And that's where we have something called as Docker. Docker is one of the applications or one of the software which implements this concept of container. So when you install Docker, you in the same operating system, you can create different containers, right? So so that was a very basic theory about what is microservices, what are the issues in deployment, why virtual machine is not good when you talk about microservices, why it's so heavy and so on. And then we talked about the containers, the container fundamentals, and we said that Docker helps you to implement it, right? Okay, so guys, any questions out here? So Docker, okay, there's a question here. Can you repeat about Docker? So yes, so Docker, if you look at Docker very quickly, I can Google out this Docker thing. If you go to Docker out here, that's the Docker image. You guys, you can see that Docker is a software. It's an open source software. It's a free software, I'll say rather. I'm not sure if it's an open source, but it's a free software which you can go and you can install and you can create isolated containers, right? So if you look at the image of Docker also, you will find those small container ships out here. You can see those small containers out there. Oh, where is my pen? If you see that image, it's like a container. So this is one isolated container. This is one isolated container, right? Nowadays, everybody has to be isolated, right? So I can see that joke going on everywhere in Facebook, be a Docker and be isolated, right? So yeah, that's what Docker is all about. So Docker is a software which actually helps you to implement containers. Okay, so guys, any questions on what is Docker? I can see a lot of questions out there. Okay, so let me take some questions. Guys. You can see here, I have like 156 people, so the room is almost full. That's terrific, right? That's terrific, man. Like, I've never seen that. How microservices communicate with each other? You can use WCF, you can use Web API, you can use CSV files, no problem. There is no standard which says that how two containers can communicate to each other. It depends on you have a legacy system or how it is, right? How hardware will be shared in this scenario? Very good question. So how will the hardware will be shared? So the hardware will be shared. I'll show you, in the Docker. It shows, that how these containers are, how much RAM is there. So we will see that part. Okay. So let us go quickly, guys. Let us see some demos. Let's not do a lot of theories. So in this 10 minutes, I'm completing this theory part, and let's go to Docker. So here is where the Docker is. This is the website of Docker. Docker is free. So at this moment, we are focusing on Docker on Windows. So Docker on Windows. So this is where you will get the setup of Docker. So you can see Docker on Windows. If you go out here, Docker on Windows download. So install Docker on Windows. So you can see here, download from Docker Hub. So you can see there is something here called as download from Docker Hub. And this is where you will go and you will install Docker, right? Guys who have missed this session of the first 3 minutes, 10 minutes, you will get the recordings, don't worry, right? Just try to follow from here. So you can see download Docker from Hub, from this Docker Hub, you will install it. Now, couple of things. I would like to really highlight this, and I'm going to go and make a snip and highlight it because this is most important. A lot of people, a lot of developer friends who are sitting at home, they have this Windows Home Edition, right? Windows 10 Home Edition and Windows 7 Home Edition. Sad news, you can't install Docker on Windows Home Editions. Forget it. And I would recommend you to install this Docker on Windows Server Edition, right? Because it is a server product, right? So don't even attempt it. I know that as a developer, people will go and try to install it. So you will see a lot of things out there, but they don't work, right? So here it is. I'm highlighting this part here, and they have clearly written it has to be Windows 10 Enterprise. It has to be Windows Pro, 64-bit, and Hyper-V has to be enabled. So if you say you want to install Docker, Hyper-V has to be enabled. Hyper-V is nothing but it is a capability of Windows by which it can do virtualization. So if you say that you want to go and run two different two different containers or two different virtual machines, right, inside Windows, then you need to enable Hyper-V, right? So so that's these are the two things which are needed. Now what I've done is I have this system out here which is ready. I just kept it ready because I knew that all this thing will come in. This is actually an Azure virtual machine. So what I've done is it's an Azure virtual machine, and in this Azure virtual machine I've just taken Windows Server 2019, and also I have enabled Hyper-V. You can see here, this is Hyper-V which is enabled, right? So these are the two prerequisites. Let me go ahead here. Let me put down in the notes all this so that I can circulate the notes after the class. So first thing, this is the installation download of the Docker. Download of Docker from here. Very, very two important prerequisite. You need to have both of them. 64-bit, definitely 64-bit. Who is on 32-bit nowadays? I don't know, but 64-bit is needed, right? And I would really say that don't go for this Pro and all, go for server. Really, really go for server, because when I do something like advanced in Docker, I find that suddenly this professional editions and enterprise also don't work, right? So you can see in my this server, everything is enabled, right? And I'm ready. Now I have installed Docker already into this. So I ran the Docker setup and I installed Docker. So you can see right away out here, right away, you can see on the taskbar. I don't know how I can go and snip that part. If you can see, I'm moving my mouse. Can you see that small icon out there? Oh, can I show that in this way? Right. So you can see out here, sorry, this is, you can see on this small icon out here, which I'm highlighting, is having that Docker icon. You can see that says that Docker is now installed. So when you go and install Docker, you have to just say next, next, next. Don't worry. There isn't too much in that, so you just say next, next, next. The only thing what he tells you is that, do you want to create a Windows Docker container or do you want to create a Linux Docker container? That's where you have to go and check Windows Docker container. And if, let's say, if you forget to do that, you still have an option. You can see here, I right click on it. You still have an option to switch to Linux. At this moment, my Docker container here is having, it's a Windows Docker container, which I've enabled, right? But if you think, no, like I want to go and switch to Linux, most welcome. You can do that later on as well, right? So I have Docker installed out here. Okay, and everything is ready. And let's see that how we can use this, right? Now, so what we will do is, you can see here, I have two applications I have created. So this is my goal. So let me quickly. So my goal is the following. I'm going to go and create two applications. One is I will create an MVC5 application, right? The old MVC5 application, and I will create MVC core application. And MVC5 application, I will install it into one container. And then MVC core application, I will go and I will install it into one container. That's the goal of this coming 20-30 minutes, what I'm planning, right? So here it is, you can see, this is my MVC5 application. This is my MVC5 application, simple one, nothing coded out here. Just I said file new project and I created this MVC5 application. In case people who are here from Java or people who are coming from other technologies, you can go and create your own application in Java must be or something. As I'm not good in Java, I have not attempted that over here, right? And this is the MVC core application. Let me open up the MVC core application also. So this is the MVC core project, right? So both the application is different. Both the applications are in different, different frameworks. At least I know that both of them belong to Microsoft, but both of the applications are in different frameworks. So this is using .NET Core, and this is using the .NET 4.x, 4.8, 4.9, right? .NET framework. Okay. So now here, okay, now couple of things, couple of fundamentals which we know, which we should know. First thing, there is a concept of image. So when you create anything of Docker, there is a concept of image. And from this image, you create a running instance, which is termed as a container. So very quickly, when you say that in Docker, you want to go and create an instance of something, or you want to run a MVC core instance or a Windows instance or whatever, right? The first thing is you have to create an instance. This instance is like a blueprint, and then you can go and create, image. And then from that image, you can go and create container instance 1, and then you can go and create container instance 2 and container instance 3. So you can think about images like, your blueprint, and container or these instances are actually which are running, right? So it's a two-step process. Now, in order to create this image, what you need to do is, point number 1, you need to have your source code, or you need to have your binaries, I will say. For example, in case of MVC5 and MVC core, I will have my DLLs, right? That is first part. For these binaries, what are the installations needed? For example, let us say I'm saying I want to install MVC5, then I need to install .NET Framework, then I need to configure IIS, I probably also need to install SQL Server, right? All these entries you need to go and create into a file called as Docker. So what we do is we create here a file. I'll just show you an example of the file also, Docker file. You can see this Docker file out here. I will go through this syntaxes, but this Docker file has all that. This Docker file has all those entries saying that which has to be installed, right? And second, sometimes what happens is you create a binary, and then from that binary you will say like, okay, please exclude the DLLs which are in the OBJ folder, right? So in case you want to ignore some files or ignore some images and so on, what you can do is you can go and create something called as the Docker ignore file. This ignore file, what it does is it ignores from this binary. If you want to ignore something, you can ignore it, right? So all of these 3 things you will take, and by using these 3 things, you go and you run a command of Docker. I'll come to that command. You run a command of Docker from the command prompt, and you create this image. And then again, you go and run the command, again a Docker command. I'll come to the commands later on, right? And then you go and you create the instance. So you can think about that. It's a 3-step process. First one, you will take all of these things, ignore file, what you want to install, all the binaries, right? And you will run the command. It will download ASP.NET 4.5. It will download this, SQL Server, create a container, package everything, load the DLLs, right? And make an image. And then you will again run the command. So this is step 2. Oops. Step 2. So this one here is step 2, where the image is created. So you'll run the command and the image is created. And then third, you will enjoy your container, right? It means you create your container and you can see your application running. 3 steps. That's it. So guys, any questions here on the steps? Let me go and see some questions. I don't want to go to questions because I can see so many questions. Guys, I will extend the training for more 15 minutes. First, let me complete the demo. I will try to answer how much of your questions I can. You can see here almost I have 160 people in the room, so you can understand my situation, right? So let me first complete the complete training, and then I will go to the questions. And as I've said, my Twitter account, my Facebook account is all open for you guys. You can go and you can put the questions. I can answer tomorrow morning. You can send me a mail at Questpond. You can go to my YouTube channel, put questions, and I'll try to answer whatever I can in my capacity. Okay, so here it is. Now let's start with MVC core application. Okay, so you can see here, this is my MVC core application, right? If I run this application, it just shows me my hello page of MVC core, the default page of MVC core, right? So there it is, my MVC core application, right? So it is on localhost. This is this, right? In the same way, I have my MVC5 application. So that is my MVC5 application. So both of these applications are out here. Okay. So slow, right? Now, both these applications, we want to go ahead and host it on our online server of Docker, right? Oh, that is slow. Fine. So this is there now. Okay, that's my MVC core application which is running. Now, first thing, and my MVC5 will also run definitely. In the MVC core application, you can see here, I have created a Docker file. You can see that I have created a Docker file. First thing you can see, all these are the source code. I have created a Docker file out here. Oh, that is the MVC5 application which is running. Let it run. So in this Docker file is something which is very important. if you don't know how to write the Docker file, or if you don't get proper Docker file, you are under big problems, right? But here is a good news. Every famous application frameworks out there, like .NET Framework or Java or PHP, right? They have standard Docker files for it. For example, like I do .NET and SQL Server and fixed technologies like IIS. For that, there are standard Docker files, right? So you have to just do proper Googling, go to the GitHub of, there is a central repository of GitHub of Docker which they have made, and you have to get the right Docker file. So you can see here, this is my Docker file out here. Look at the first syntax of this Docker file. It says from first thing, if you look at this whole thing out here, it is divided into 3 steps, okay? Again, I'm saying you shouldn't be writing the Docker file by your own hand. Google it, understand the syntaxes, change it as per your application directory, and then try to see that it works or not, right? But I will make you understand this Docker file of MVC core out here. This first syntax from this, what it does is, it goes to this Microsoft site and it gets the image of the .NET Core SDK. At this moment, my application is built using .NET Core 3.1, so I need to go and get this .NET Core 3.1, right? The next syntax here says, what is your working directory at this moment? So my working directory at this moment is MVC Core app. So all my project files are inside that. Then what we do is we go ahead and we copy the solution and chproj file into one directory, and then we run .NET Restore. This .NET Restore is a command in case you have done .NET Core. It gets all the necessary DLLs and bin files, from Nugget. So it will get all whatever is necessary for this project and install it locally. After that, I'm saying .NET Publish. This will actually go and publish the application. And then I'm saying that the entry point of this MVC Core application is this app.dll, and start running the application. So you can see here, these syntaxes out here do nothing, but they are compiling, they are getting the SDK, they are publishing it, and they are making things live, right? Now look at my MVC5. My MVC5, I've made it pretty simple. I've kept MVC5 pretty simple out here. Please note, I don't have SQL Server at this moment. So this Docker file can get pretty complex, when it comes to SQL Server, right? So here is my MVC5 application. So if you see my MVC5 application Docker file, I can just show it out here. MVC5 application Docker file is only of these 2 lines you can see here. It's in this, if you see why why the MVC core file is very big, because of my stupidity, frankly, right? What I should have done is, I should have done the build, all the build things inside my Visual Studio. So I should do the build. And the only thing what I should do out here is, I should not be doing this .NET Restore, this .NET Publish. These are extra things out here, right? I should probably just get the SDK and then go ahead and put the DLL and make it live, right? But here in this MVC core, this .NET Docker file, I've just made things complicated. I wanted to show you that even if you want, you can do the get latest, you can do the nugget, you can do .NET Publish, you can do everything from the Docker file. That's what my goal was. But normally your Docker file should be very, very simple. I would suggest that just go ahead and build the file separately, right? As you do in your development environment, once you do your UAT. And then when you want to go live, you will just say this, get the framework, get the release DLLs and publish it in whichever virtual directory you want to publish it, right? So you can see here, my MVC file is very simple. I'm going to go and publish the DLLs, and I will copy those published DLLs into www root, and I'm done, right? So I have created Docker files for both of them, right? And I will now go out here. So if you see on this server, so let's go on this server. On this server, I have copied everything into application. So you can see here, there are 2 applications. Can I make the fonts bigger? Display settings. Let me see if, oh, looks like the Azure VMs don't allow me to do that. Okay, it's a remote session, he says. Okay, fine. I hope everybody can see this, right? So you can see out here, this is MVC5. And you can see the MVC5, you can see the publish files are out here, right? And these are the Docker file and the Docker ignore file. Remember I said you also should be having the Docker ignore file. So in MVC5, I've just put the DLLs, the views, the DLLs, whatever I want for needing live, and the Docker file is out here. I can just go and open this and show you. So this is my Docker file out here. Very simple one, very, very simple. 2-3 lines of code, right? Just make the fonts bigger. So there it is. In the same way, for MVC core also, I have created the Docker file out here, the same thing. Docker file, notepad. Same one which I explained you in Visual Studio. The same thing is out here, right? So all the files are there, everything is there. So we have completed the step 1. So we have completed the step 1. So this step is completed. We have the Docker files, we have put it online, right? Now we need to go and, so this one is completed. Now we need to go and run a command and create this image, right? So in order to go and create an image, you need to run some Docker commands. And let's start with the first command of creating the image. So you can see here, to create an image, you will say docker build -t my image. And where is the Docker file? You can see that small dot sign out there. It says that the Docker file is created in the same directory. Remember that this dot is very important. It says that where your Docker file is located, right? So we need to go and run this command, and this command will go to that Docker file. It will install everything and it will create an image and keep for you. And then when you want to go and create an instance, you will say docker run. So docker build to create an image, docker run to create an instance. So here this command is docker build, and then when you want to go and create an instance, this command here will be docker run. My handwriting is horrible, right? So okay, so I'm going to go now to my server out here, right? And I can go here. You can see now I am on my command prompt, right? So these are my two applications out here, MVC5 and MVC core. So let us go to MVC core app, right? And so here you can see, let me just say directory. So you can see my Docker file is here, Docker ignore file is here, all is here, right? So first thing, docker build. So let me copy paste from there. So I'm going to go and copy paste the command from there, docker build, and we will create an MVC core image. So we will go here. Remember this dot sign, I'm highlighting it, is very important. It says that the file where the Docker file is located. If you say .. it will go to the top directory. If you say / something else, it will go to that directory, right? So you have to change the directory name. So I will go here and say, must be I can just say, give a proper name. What happens is on production, when you go, if you're going to have a lot of images, a lot of instances, you will end up into a catastrophe. The management of those images and instances become very difficult, and that's where we have Kubernetes, which we will be talking tomorrow. You can see here, it is such a pain. I have to go and create the Docker file. I have to do this. I have to run the command, right? And it becomes very difficult to manage when the instances and the images go very high, right? So that's what is tomorrow's plan. So I'll just go and say MVC core image 1, and I will say dot in the current directory, right? So it will now go, and now remember guys, please note, at this moment I have already ran this docker build command once. Okay, I have ran the docker build command once because it takes a lot of time to download these SDKs, compile the project, right? So already I have done that. But when you do it for the first time at your end, this will take like 10-15 minutes. Okay, so you will go and you will say docker build MVC core image. You will go again to MVC5 and you will say docker build MVC5 image, right? So now in this server, I have already built images. I have built 2 images already. So I'm not going to go and run the command again for MVC5. So you can see here, if I say docker images out here, this is a command to list what images we have. So you can see this MVC core image 1 we just built. But before coming to the class, I had built this MVC core image and MVC5 image. Please note this is NVC core, N for Nepal. I'm so sorry, that's a mistake, but now let's keep it as as it is. So MVC core image and MVC5 image, so 2 images, right? You can also see there are other images created. For example, you can see he has created an image of SDK. He has created an image of ASP.NET 4.5. And look at this, it is 8 GB. Now, what it means, tomorrow, let us say, if you create one more application, which is of .NET 4.5, he will not go and install this image again because you already have it in your computer. So he will use the same image and then build an instance for you, right? So you can see even of the frameworks, and he has created the image, right? But our images are these. Definitely the MVC5 image must be using this. The MVC core image must be using these two, right? But at the end of the day, we are going to go and run both of these, right? Okay. So again, the second step I have completed. The second step. So the second step. Running this command, and I've created 2 images. One is the MVC5 image and the one is the MVC core image, right? Now the next is to run Docker run, right, and create the instances. Now a couple of important points here. I will come to questions. I will come to questions to everyone, don't worry, okay? So before you run Docker run, we need to understand that how does the port configuration happen? Because okay, fine, you can have different instances, but at the end of the day, when your web server runs, it will run on only one port, and this port is actually a physical unit. So when something is running on 80 port, you can't run again on 80 port, right? So now here is your host machine. So this is your host machine out here. So you have a Docker container out here, Docker container 1, must be you will have MVC5 here, fine. You will have Docker container 2, you will have MVC core here, and you can have Docker container 3. Why not Linux? I'm not against Linux, guys. It's just that I'm a big fan of Microsoft, so I don't use, even when I take training, I take only related to Microsoft. That's just my habit. Okay, so right. So, but here it is. I can see one question out there. Why don't you do Linux on Docker? There are a lot of things on Linux on Docker. You take out one tutorial which really dedicates to Windows on Docker. None. So that's why this training is only for Windows on Docker. So MVC5, MVC core, and all, right? Now think about it. So let's say I have a web application here, and I want to host that on, let's say I'm hosting this on 80 port, no problem. This also I host on 80 port, right? Because inside the Docker, you can host on 80 port. But here, this physical computer has only one port. So now what I have to do is I have to say, okay, this, let's say 80 port maps to this one. Then I will say 81, but will now map to this one. And then 82 will map now to this one. So in other words, if I want to go and access this application of Linux, it will be like, it will come to 82 port, the request will come, and then later it will be streamed to that 80 port of that respective Docker, right? So what I mean is, when you run the Docker build command, run command, you have to give 2 port numbers out here. One is the host port, and the other one is the port, inside the Docker where your application runs. So you can see here, this is the Docker run. It says that, okay, first is the host port and second is the Docker port. And then from this image, create this instance, right? So I'm going to go and copy this command out here, and let's go back again to our MVC core app, right? And we will say now Docker run MVC core, we will host on localhost 80. And I will say, let us create an instance called as MVC core instance. MVC core instance using image. What was the name of the image? We can get the name of the image from this dashboard of Docker. You can see there is a dashboard of Docker out here. I think it was MVC. Let me run that Docker images again. Okay, MVC core image. I'm so sorry. So let me do that. You can see here now I've just listed the. So I'll say here now this is MVC core. instance, and this is MVC, and the image is NVC core instance. I'm sorry, that word NVC, it's a typo. So NVC core image. So this is the one image, this is the one instance I'm going to create. MVC core in. Now remember, from one image you can create multiple instances. I can say, okay, MVC core instance 1. Again, I can create one more. But remember, if you're doing that, please ensure that you give a port number properly. You can't give then 80 again, right? You have to probably say, okay, 81 will now map. Look at this. 81, right? So this will create one more instance, no problem, right? You can see the long GUID out there that indicates basically it's a unique number, you know, given to an instance. Now in the same way, let us go ahead and create, let's map 82 to MVC5 instance. So let us create an MVC5 instance, MVC5 instance, and we will use MVC5 image, MVC5 image, right? Remember guys, nowadays these are all automated. Because this is a beginner tutorial, I just want to make sure that you guys understand the commands first, and then we will see the different tools which are available to make this easy, right? So here it is. So you can see now guys, I've created 3 instances, 2 instances of MVC core and 2 instances of MVC5. And all of this, I can see it on the Docker dashboard. So you can see here, I can go to Docker out here, and you can see this Docker dashboard out here. I can go to the dashboard and I can see my instances running, right? So let us go to this MVC core instance and let us try to run this. So I can open them in the browser. So you can see my MVC core instance is running out here. This is my second MVC core instance, but please note this is running on the 81 port. Look at this. This is so interesting. So you can see this is on 81 port. This is on 80 port, and we also had an MVC5 instance. So that's my MVC5 instance. And oops, the traditional error of MVC5. So there is some error out here, but you can see that the application did get run over there. I need to check, you know, what the error is. So MVC5 is running here, and MVC core instances are running here, and this is how Docker containers work, right? So that was a very, very simple demonstration of Docker. And then we created this MVC5 image, we created MVC core, and so on, right? So, so guys, any questions, anything? How to enable Hyper-V? That's a good question, Prasad. So Hyper-V, so when you actually start your BIOS, just hit delete, right? And then go to the BIOS and just say enable Hyper-V. And you can also, if you're using Windows Server, then you can enable Hyper-V through the Windows Server Manager as well. So let me put down the questions now. So guys, any questions? Please go ahead. So let's look at all the questions now. I'll try to, how to enable Hyper-V from the BIOS. Remember guys, we only have 1 hour. So in 1 hour, I don't want to show those things, you know, which will take a day for you, right? So these things I've just enabled it. How much is Docker secure? See, at the end of the day, Docker is a container. It's about your application. Your application should be using JWT token. It should use SSL. So this is all, you know, if you follow the best practices, Docker will ensure that things are good, right? So rather than saying how much is Docker secured, the question should be that how much is your application secured, right? Okay, let me, oh, so many questions. Let me see. Okay, let me take questions one by one. If some of the people know the answers, you can please answer it down. I should start from the top. Good evening, everyone. Okay, guys, let me take questions one by one. Okay, let's take me this question. So, can database be different for submodules as they would be referring to some reference? Absolutely. When you talk about microservices, you saw just now, I created 2 different instances. So database should be different, everything should be different, and so on. Here is the thing, I understand that people are really infatuated with microservices, and I have to teach you microservices because a lot of people like it. But I feel that, microservices At the same time, where they are very great and awesome, where you can do parallel development, I sometimes think that monolith also has its own sweet spot. Monolith applications are also great. So there should be a reason that why you are developing microservices, why you are going to Docker. And the most important thing is parallel development. If you think that if you have a big organization like some big organization where you have 100 people working in a project, microservices has to be there, because then parallel development has to be there, isolated development has to be there, right? So there should be a reason why microservices is needed in a project. For example, you have 4 developer team who are sitting near to each other, they talk every day on the phone. I don't feel that microservices would really help you out, right? So at the time, monolith architecture is good because your team is small, you can coordinate well, right? So I feel that there should be a reason that why you should use microservices and not just follow not just follow the wave what is going on. How transactions is handled between microservices? No, between microservices transaction is not handled. I think these questions, those are 2 isolated units. So it's something you have to use your development skills and do it. Inside SQL Server, you can have a transaction. Inside .NET, you will use something transaction scope and so on. Between 2 WCF and Web API, again, you can have some transaction logic what you can write. But as such, microservices or Docker does not help you to do transaction. They just help you to create lightweight container instances. Okay. Can you explain the container a bit more? I think I've explained that. Are there any scenarios? Okay, very good question, Varun. I think I answered that question. Are there any scenarios where monolith application is favorable? This is my thought process. Please, guys, I understand lots of gurus of microservices won't agree to this. But I think if you have a small team, small application, you're like, for example, I work for a EMR company, a hospital management system. Over there, what happens is, when the hospital says he wants a software, he wants accounting, inventory, payroll, everything he wants. That's it. He just says, come and install it, right? And my team is like 15 people, and I still have to ask myself that, do I have to really do microservices or not, right? And one more important point, do not, I'm going to go and write this on the notepad. Do not try, which a lot of people try, do not try to convert your old monolith application to microservices. I see a lot of consultancy which I get, they said, oh, like our application is in ASP.NET 3.5, can we do microservices? And they're like, so you have to separate your tables, your databases, think about it, your code, your DLLs, it's a mess. So if you're starting a new project, I feel that you can start with a clean slate, or else like you need to think about it, right? If I have a Windows application and Linux and my host is, okay. I can see some questions. When is Kubernetes tomorrow? Kubernetes is tomorrow. Okay. And Linux application, let me see. If I have Windows and Linux application container and my host OS is Linux, then how container software runs those applications without any issues? And I have Windows. See, like the Docker creates, so the question here is, let's say if I have Linux and inside Linux, you say that I want to run a Windows container. As I've said, that Docker, what it does is it knows about the Windows operating system. He hosts the necessary DLLs accordingly. So we don't have to worry about it. He will do it. You really don't have to worry about it. Believe me, it will do it. Okay, let me go down. Can we assign custom URL to service? Yes, you can assign a custom URL to service. Yes. Let me take the next set of questions. Guys, I'm putting the questions out here. Can you assign a custom URL? Absolutely. See, at this moment, it was localhost. You can use your own URL, what you want to, right? It's causing VPN issues. Okay. Okay. Will we get the video recording? Yes, you will get the video recording. Yes. Okay. Yes, you will get the video recording. I was not able to log in. The room is full. Yes, I also. Okay, this is a good question. Let me take that. Docker toolbox allows to write install even in Windows 10 Home Edition. I knew that one of the developers will put that. I knew that, Abhishek. So try it, and it is not so easy. You will get, as you can see, like I tried it 3 months back. I had a Windows Home Edition, and and I literally like I had to format my Windows Home. Yes, Docker Toolbox allows you to do it, but I don't know how clean it is. You can try to go and see the messages out on Stack Overflow, and also on the Docker website. It is not so encouraging. I will say don't go that path. It does not work. Home edition won't be supported. No home edition. No. Okay, try it. Okay, try Docker Toolbox. I will not comment on that. I know developers are developers. Can we use Windows 10 Docker image with Kubernetes? Amit will tomorrow talk about Kubernetes. So let's leave the Kubernetes for tomorrow. Okay. Is there a Docker template in .NET Core? Yes. So there is a Docker temp. I will not say. See now template. This is a good question. At the end of the day, it's all about the template, right? Here you really need to do some hacks. For example, you will get a template. You will get, when I say template means what? Let me open up a Docker file. This is a good question. For example, let's say you want to install .NET Core. Okay, here it is from this SDK. Let's say you want to install SQL Server from this. But then you need to go and say, okay, like I want to go and create a new database. Well, we need to see now how to do that, right? So some of the things you really have to customize it. But I think most of the images you will get it. But you can see a run.NET restore. For this, you should have the knowledge of how .NET command works, right? So yes, templates means you will get these things, these downloads properly, but then the one like compiling, zipping, copying, those commands you need to figure it out as per your application. Okay. Why just created image? Yeah, why it was created 3 hours ago. So, okay, I'll answer the questions. Let me focus on questions. Okay. Where did that question thing go? Oh. Okay, I'll put it here. Okay, MVC core image is showing some, yeah, 5 hours ago, I just ensured that I don't have any problem in the training. This is a 1 hour of training. I wanted to just ensure my environments are right. So that's what it was. Okay, I can see. Yeah. How can I edit a Docker image? Very good question. Or I'll say, how can I update a Docker image? That's a good question. So it's very difficult actually. Edit is difficult. So we'll come to this. At this moment, I do a Docker remove and then I do a Docker, update and so on. But edit, I have not tried actually. There are some commands of edit, but they don't really help out. Remember that you cannot log in into a Docker instance. It is not a virtual machine. It is not an operating system at all. It is just the necessary binaries of the operating. You will not see a start menu. So everything what you do is from the Docker commands, right? So that's why there is a limitation. Must be tomorrow when we discuss about Kubernetes, I will talk about this edit also. Okay. What benefit does Windows container provide as compared to Linux container? No benefits really. Okay, so here's a good question. Is there any benefit? So I think the benefit is probably of the licenses. So if you go to Linux, it is free, but here it is, you have to pay the licenses, I think, for the containers also, right? I feel that Linux is very much integrated, or I'll say updated with Docker, because when Docker first started, they only built for Linux, right? They were compelled to support Windows because a lot of developers were asking for it. But now I can see that for Windows also, it's going on very well. So I will use Windows container, when I'm installing applications like SQL Server, old ones, MVC5. MVC5 does not work on Linux. So I don't see that how I can use a Linux container out there. But if I'm doing MVC core, then probably I will think about Linux, right? So if you're doing pure Microsoft old technologies like WPF, etc., must be it is 8 GB is too much. Yeah, because that was the old .NET framework. So the question here is 8 GB is too much. Yeah, that was the old .NET framework, 4.5. It installs GAC, it installs everything, right? So that's why. How to access the Docker data in public URL? Good question. See, once the Docker is there, then you have to map the domain to it, right? So at this moment, I said localhost. I can go and give the IP, the public IP, and map it to my domain, my DNS. Ux and Docker, third day. That is for the third day. Okay, how to do SQL Server? Okay, a lot of questions out there. I can see a lot of questions. Session management between instances. Guys, I'll take up questions now, which I feel are good. See, there is no session management. These are two different virtual machines you can think about. So session management, you need to handle it. Yeah, how to integrate SQL Server with Docker image. For SQL Server also you have a Docker image. So if you see here, Google, we start using a Googling skills now. SQL Server image for Docker. See that? Oh, image for Docker, I'm sorry. Image Docker. And normally it goes to this hub.docker where almost all the images are given, the Docker files are given. So he must have given something out here. Oh no, not this one. Docker file. Example, yeah. Googling skills. Let me use that. Okay, you can see here, this is again from, so looks like that takes 2.1. What about SQL Server? Look at that, Docker SQL Server. Show me the Docker SQL Server. So Docker SDK, that should be Docker SQL Server as well. Yeah, let's look at this SQL hack. I'll just show you the command of Docker SQL Server, and then you can have a look later on. Where is the Docker file? Show me the Docker file. Okay, guys, I can give that thing later on. Where is that from SQL image? Yeah, that's the Docker SQL Server, but okay, just send me a message, on Questpond. I'll give you the exact thing out here. But you can see here, guys, at the end of the day, from, okay, let me not do the R&D now. But there should be something like, from SQL images like this, from mcr.microsoft.com, SQL Server, something should be there, runtime and so on. Something, that kind of thing should be there, right? Must be I should take one lecture, with .NET Core, with SQL Server on Docker. I'll try that. I can understand the pain point. Okay, let me put this. We have more 3 minutes, but I'm going to go and extend the session for more 5 minutes. This is a very good question, and some ultimate or one of the core objectives, we can develop app in one platform and we can deploy in another platform. No, Docker is not meant for that. Docker is not meant for really cross-platform. It is meant, because you want multiple developers to work parallelly. You want the deployment to happen parallelly. You want all that CI/CD, continuous integration, continuous development. People work day and night, right? So for that, it is not about cross-platform. No, cross-platform is already, it has to do cross-platform because you are saying you want to run multiple, but it's not really the cross-platform thing. It is about multiple deployments, using less memory, not having the whole virtual machine copy, and only having the necessary binary files. So not really I feel the parallel development is more the motive out here. Session state management, no, not possible. Performance point of view, microservices is bad in performance. I can say that, and you guys can also know it. Monolith application will not make any cross calls. So when you create an microservices, that means you have to enable CORS. You're going to go and post from one container to another container. So yes, the performance I feel of microservices can be a bit down as compared to monolith. But as I've said, that more from the performance point of view, first understand that, do you really have a big team who does parallel development? That's the question. I will share the Docker file, everything will be there in the video, don't worry. Just send a mail at questpond@questpond.com. Okay, guys, lot of questions. This is so many questions. Guys, can you do one thing? Let me do that for you. Can you please send me a mail at questpond@questpond.com? You can also follow me on Twitter, right? So if you can just send me a mail out here with all your questions, because I can see 300 questions, almost impossible for me at this moment. And let us respect everyone's time here. Let us try to complete on time. So thank you very much. Thanks a lot. I can see that I was not able to answer all the questions. Okay, so we can have all the questions on the log sheet. So please send me that log sheet, and I will try to put all the answers out there. Twitter ID, yeah. So Shiv Koirala, that's my Twitter ID. Questpond also you can follow. If you want to follow the company directly, you can follow Questpond. So guys, thank you very much. Tomorrow, again from 9 p.m. to 10 p.m., we are connecting for Kubernetes. So today we saw all the pain points, right? We saw that how painful it is to do the deployment, how painful it was to do everything, right? If you have 4 or 5 Docker images, and in production, I always find like 10, 15 Docker images suddenly, then how do we deal with that? And that's where we have Kubernetes. It makes your deployment super easy, right? So let's discuss about it tomorrow. Thank you very much. Thanks a lot. Thank you.